The king's back. 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 The king's back.
What's up? What's good? What's happening? Welcome to my live stream. I am the actual King Smith, and this is my Wednesday vlog where I come on and talk about whatever the funk I want to talk about. Tonight, I'm going to talk about the LA riots, of 2025, because it seems like LA's always rioting about something. If something's about to pop off, and it's happening in LA, and there's always a reason, all right? But in this one, we're going to be talking about specifically what's going on between our federal and state powers here in the U.S. And I'm going to showcase Governor Gavin Newsom's 8-minute video that I thought was actually a damn good speech. But it's not just about how you talk. It's about what you're able to do as well and the influence that you have in taking care of business. Okay? And that's going to be our show for today. All right. So, first things first. Let's see if we got any comments in the building. If not, we're just going to jump right into it. Oh, I'm streaming across multiple platforms. Twitch, Kick, X, YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn, I believe. If there's a like button on the platform that you're watching this on, do me a solid. Hit that like button. That helps me out on the algorithm. That's the algorithm. So let's get into the first point here and talk about what sparked the outrest. Okay? So let's get into it. Let's talk about what really lit the fuse. Okay? So ICE is immigrations and customs enforcement. They're one of the federal entities at the federal level that does exactly what their name sounds. They enforce immigrations and customs laws that we have in the United States. A lot of people are wondering and asking the questions, what are their power? When is it that they can do an overreach of their power. There's a difference between going into places and targeting things versus enforcing what is discovered. That's how I look at it anyway. I've been to Thailand. I was walking down the street in Thailand one time when a Thai customs enforcement agent officer asked me to see my paperwork. And one of the things when you visit some places, right, they'll tell you you must keep your visa on you at all times. And because I look like I'm not from Thailand, they, according to their law, had the authority to stop me, ask to see my visa, and make sure that I didn't overstay my visa. It's a very popular and known tactic that they do. We don't necessarily do that here in the US. But what our current president has started doing is he started targeting certain areas that, similar to what they do in Thailand, demand to see your papers. But some people are saying that it feels very targeted because they're doing it to more people that have brown skin than people that might have fairer skin coming from other countries that would be overstaying a visa as well. Shout out to Greek Pete in the building, said, "Hey brother, what's up, man? I appreciate you popping in. I thought you were streaming tonight." But so ICE in this instance in early June didn't just do routine raids. They pulled up in places like Home Depot and Los Angeles Fashion District. Families were caught off guard and people got swept up who weren't even the targets of these enforcement from ICE. Okay. Word started spreading fast about people getting snatched up. And by that same night, this was early June 6th, by that same night, you had crowds outside of a detention center, people using their smartphones like this to live stream arrests, and folks started blocking intersections. It spread just like that. Los Angeles seems to do that though. If one thing happens in Los Angeles the wrong way, something seems like it's gonna pop off. Okay. So early on, you had the governor, the mayor, and people reporting and saying that things were peaceful. On other places and things, you had glass shattered, fires being started. It wasn't just peaceful signs and chants and organized protests. It was straight up chaos. We're seeing people waving flags. There's fires everywhere. Mild looting occurring. So, how do you go from the people on the ground that's responsible for the state safety going, hey, everything was great, but then you have our president going, it's chaos. I'm about to invoke Title 10. We sending federal troops in there, which we're going to talk about a little bit later on. So, the question is this: when do people feel unheard? How else do people get attention? Were the right people getting attention? Or was it, as some people are going to say, it's people here that are illegal that are having the loudest voices? Think about that. And also this, do you believe that civil unrest, like what's going on right now, is justified? Or is it a step that's too far? I've got a video because some people are saying, King, some of this stuff that you're seeing is fake, yada, yada. And I've got two videos actually. One is news coverage of the event, and the other one, just watch. That video that you see to the right there, and I'm going to throw it on loop and mute the sound. That's video that I created using Google VO3, VEO, Victor Echo Oscar. And I put in a prompt that said, give me a video of people rioting in downtown Los Angeles. Make sure that something's burning in the background. I wish it added cops. Now, because of the version that I have, I can only do 3 videos a day. And literally, I thought about this right before I went live. I was like, if some people are saying that things are fake, let me see how easy these deep fake videos can be made up. And when I say it took me 15 seconds, no, it took me 15 seconds to get to the website, 10 seconds or less to type in the prompt. And then it took Google VO about 2 minutes to make this 8-second video with sound. This right here is a fake video, but to me it looks fake, right? It looks too cinematic. Now, if I had time, I have video editing software that I can take to change the filter, the lighting of it a little bit to make it look less cinematic. It's not that hard to do, but I just wanted to point that out real quick. P said that he is streaming, but not until or his team members are streaming at 9:30. All right, dope. So I wanted to showcase that real quick because yes, some videos can be fake, but the ones that I'm going to show, and this is particularly a Houston coverage video. There's one that I'm going to show a little bit later on that is showing actual things that are occurring down there. Okay. Now, this is happening in the state. And I want to highlight something real quick. What's the difference between um, the governor's responsibilities and the president's responsibilities? So let's start there. So the governor is the state level top executive. He's like the president, but for the state. Some people don't really understand what a governor actually does. So the governor is the chief executive of the state that he's elected for, and is elected by the people in that state. And they're responsible for enforcing the state laws and maintaining public order within their boundaries. So the governor of California is not responsible for the governor of the state of Nevada. They're responsible for California. But if you are a good governor and you have, you should ensure that you have some type of neighboring relations with the other states next to you. That way y'all can share resources and things that might be needed. I know some people said, well, King, states shouldn't be worried about the states, they should go federal. I'm not an expert on how to ensure resources are done well, but sometimes I'm like, why don't we think different? Why don't we think outside the box on some things? But the governor's primary responsibility is their state. Some of their key responsibilities are deploying the state National Guard under Title 32 orders to respond to emergencies like national disasters, riots, or public safety threats. The National Guard did not get spun up by the governor. They got spun up by the president. And some people are questioning the president's ability to be able to do that. They oversee state, police, local agencies, and their emergency management. They're the ones that declare state emergencies to activate resources and curfews and evacuations, which Governor Newsom, the governor of California, did enact a curfew. And they defend the state sovereignty. The governor can refuse federal intervention unless it's authorized under federal law. And there are a few, actually one, and I found one federal law that can be done. And the governor can file a lawsuit if they feel as though federal actions violate states' rights, which Newsom has done. Okay. So again, the governor is like the president of their state when it comes to the state's safety and civil issues. Now, I'm not going to talk much about the president. People understand what the president's role is. They're the federal executive. They're responsible for national defense, foreign policy, which is where ICE comes in, and ensuring that federal law is upheld across the U.S. Okay? Now, if there's any type of civil unrest, what powers do the president have? The president can deploy federal forces under Title 10 to protect federal property, enforce federal law, and quell insurrections, but only under specific legal conditions. They oversee DHS, ICE, and Border Patrol, which can operate within states, but it's typically done with coordination through state and local officials. And the president can federalize the National Guard, taking it out of control of the governor in extreme situations. Think about what Eisenhower did during desegregation in the 1950s. Okay? But here's where it can get controversial. The president can bypass the governor only in narrow, legally defined scenarios. Otherwise, it's seen as a bit of an overreach, right? And when they clash, you have federalism at stake. The U.S. Constitution is set up to keep the power sharing dynamic between the state and local governments. And if a president sends troops into a state without consent, it can spark legal battles over the Passe Comitatus Act, which limits military involvement in civilian law enforcement. And I was curious what that act was. So I brought it up here, and I'm going to find my summary that I had for it here. Let me scroll. Let's see. So there's a section under there, which is section 1076, that's titled Use of the Armed Forces in Major Public Emergencies. It can be done provided that the president may employ the armed forces to restore order and enforce the laws of the United States when, as a result of a national disaster, an epidemic, or other serious public health emergency, terrorist attack or incident, or other condition that the president determines domestic violence has occurred to such an extent that the constituted authorities of the state or possession are incapable of maintaining public order, or to suppress in a state any insurrection, domestic violence, unlawful combination, or conspiracy, if such a condition so hinders the execution of the laws that any part or class of its people is deprived of a right, privilege, immunity, or protection named in the Constitution and secured by law. I just said a lot. All right. Kathy Cree over on Facebook said, those soldiers will not be paid at all, nor have adequate housing. I wish I had the photo. So I don't know where you saw that they're not going to be paid at. You can't be activated and not paid. I've never seen an instance or have heard of a scenario where activated soldiers aren't paid. So what ended up happening and what the federal response was is that our current president, President Trump, sent approximately 2,000 National Guard troops plus 700 Marines. And he didn't just ask, he didn't coordinate, he just did that shit. Federal agents in camouflage were detaining people in unmarked vans. That's not a conspiracy. That's confirmed. There are detained, not housing areas, but sites where federal people are housing folks that are detained. Some people, rightfully so, it is stated that others were not properly detained. Now, there are several videos and YouTubers and other people that have been interviewed saying that Los Angeles was burning. When is it not? Cops were outnumbered, and someone had to restore order. And they felt like the governor, Gavin Newsom, wasn't doing anything to restore order. President Trump was interviewed, and I'm kind of paraphrasing, and I might have this video later on where he was saying that, and I'm paraphrasing, that the governor should be fired. Think about that. The governor's not elected and can be fired by a president. Not that I'm aware of. If somebody's aware of if a governor can be removed from office by a president, let me know. I don't know what I just drunk. I don't know what that was or how long that's been there. People were saying that the federal deployment of the National Guard wasn't about law enforcement. that it was a test of martial law in disguise to see just exactly what our president could get away with doing. And I don't know if I agree with that, but I can see that side of an argument being said just based on my narrow interpretation of constitutional laws and state powers and things. All right. So, what do y'all think? Should using the military against our own civilians, right? People that are citizens, some non-citizens in our area, would using our military against civilians without the state's permission crossing the line? Should the president have that kind of power during protests, or did Newsom drop the ball and force our president's hand? Okay. I'll give some people to answer that if they're watching live. If not, we're going to go to the next thing for those of y'all that aren't watching live and are going to catch this on the replay. What have the local people talked about? Because this wasn't just a war between government branches. It was a cry from the ground up. The Mayor Bass, said very loud and clear, "We will protect our immigrant communities." She issued a curfew, okay, and also told the feds, "Stand down. I got this." Governor Newsom didn't just disagree with what our president did. He filed a lawsuit, like I talked about earlier, that they can do. He called it an invasion of state rights, and in his speech, he warned this is how democracy dies if we let it. Okay? Kathy Cree said that the president was wrong on so many levels. So many levels. Now, I'm going to play Governor Newsom's speech here. It's an 8-minute speech. I'm going to have to stop it from time to time. I'll try to keep my pauses short, but I want to get y'all's take on what the governor said.
I want to say a few words about the events of the last few days. This past weekend, federal agents conducted large-scale workplace raids in and around Los Angeles. Those raids continue as I speak. California is no stranger to immigration enforcement, but instead of focusing on undocumented immigrants with serious criminal records and people with final deportation orders, a strategy both parties have long supported, this administration is pushing mass deportations, indiscriminately targeting hardworking immigrant families, regardless of their roots or risk. What's happening right now is very different than anything we've seen before. On Saturday morning, when federal agents jumped out of an unmarked van near a Home Depot parking lot, they began grabbing people, a deliberate targeting of a heavily Latino suburb. A similar scene played out when a clothing company was raided downtown. In other actions, a U.S. citizen, 9 months pregnant, was arrested.
Okay, so right here, he's talking about Californians. This is his address to the state. But in my opinion, this was also done to garner eyes and get the discussions talked about on what's going on across a national level as well. This is him getting into the court of public opinion. Okay, so let's continue.
A 4-year-old girl taken, families separated, friends quite literally disappearing. In response, everyday Angelenos came out to exercise their constitutional right to free speech and assembly, to protest their government's actions. In turn, the state of California and the city and county of Los Angeles sent our police officers to help keep the peace. And with some exceptions, they were successful. Like many states, California is no stranger to this sort of unrest.
I mean, California seems to lead the nation in unrest whenever unrest happens. Am I wrong?
We manage it regularly and with our own law enforcement. But this, again, was different. What then ensued was the use of tear gas, flashbang grenades, rubber bullets. Federal agents detaining people and undermining their due process rights. Donald Trump, without consulting California law enforcement leaders, commandeered 2,000 of our state's National Guard members to deploy on our streets, illegally and for no reason. This brazen abuse of power by a sitting president inflamed a combustible situation, putting our people, our officers, and even our National Guard at risk. That's when the downward spiral began. He doubled down on his dangerous National Guard deployment by fanning the flames even harder. And the president, he did it on purpose. As the news spread throughout LA, anxiety for family and friends ramped up. Protests started again. By night.
Okay. So Governor Newsom was saying that things were under control. It wasn't bad until our president came in, started using strong arm tactics, and that's when things started escalating. Let's continue.
Several dozen lawbreakers became violent and destructive. They vandalized property. They tried to assault police officers. Many of you have seen the video clips of cars burning on cable news. If you incite violence, I want to be clear about this. If you incite violence or destroy our communities, you're going to be held to account. That kind of criminal behavior will not be tolerated. Full stop. Already people have been arrested, and we're reviewing tapes to build additional cases, and people will be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law.
Okay. So right now, Governor Newsom is saying, look, to the people that are violating the laws, we are going to prosecute you. You're not just going to be out here breaking things, torching stuff, damaging things, and get away with it. But this is where some people are wondering how things are going to occur and what's the difference between the people that are protesting in this versus those that occurred during the earlier January 6th incident, in which several people went into federal spaces, vandalized, did some things, galvanized by not then elected President Trump, and got off scot-free. Some people did, but for the most part, they didn't. People got off from that or got convicted and later got pardoned. Let's continue.
Again, thanks to our law enforcement officers and the majority of Angelenos who protested peacefully, the situation was winding down and was concentrated in just a few square blocks downtown. But that's not what Donald Trump wanted. He again chose escalation. He chose more force. He chose theatrics over public safety. He federalized another 2,000 Guard members. He deployed more than 700 active U.S. Marines. These are the men and women trained for foreign combat, not domestic law enforcement. We honor their service. We honor their bravery. But we do not want our streets militarized by our own armed forces.
I like how he said that. And he actually has a really good point there. The Marines, as far as I know, the Marines aren't sent and deployed for civil unrest areas. I'm not a history guy, but I can't think of a time where Marines got sent someplace within our own borders to stop things. Where did the Marines deploy during the January 6th insurrection?
In LA, not in California, not anywhere. We're seeing unmarked cars in school parking lots, kids afraid of attending their own graduation. Trump is pulling a military dragnet all across Los Angeles, well beyond his stated intent to just go after violent and serious criminals. His agents are arresting dishwashers, gardeners, day laborers, and seamstresses. That's just weakness masquerading as strength. Donald Trump's government isn't protecting our communities. They're traumatizing our communities. And that seems to be the entire point. California will keep fighting. We'll keep fighting on behalf of our people, all of our people, including in the courts. Just yesterday, we filed a legal challenge to Donald Trump's reckless deployment of American troops to a major American city.
As I talked about
Today,
earlier.
we sought an emergency court order to stop the use of the American military to engage in law enforcement activities across Los Angeles. If some of us could be snatched off the streets without a warrant, based only on suspicion or skin color, then none of us are safe.
Now, that's an excellent point. That's an excellent point. Because let me ask you this. What does an American look like? What does an American look like? I told y'all earlier before we got into all of this at the very beginning of this live stream, when I was in Thailand, I got stopped and asked to have my visa shown. Okay? All the people that were walking around, boop, hey you, come here. With them wearing their uniform. I showed my visa. They checked it, said I was good, went on about my business. The whole interaction itself was less than a minute. But at the same time, I'm like, did they just target me? Because I don't look like them. So that's what the governor's saying as well, right? People that are really up in arms are saying it's more of the Latino population or the Latin population that's being targeted by this. You don't see them targeting European people. You don't see European looking people, right? You don't see them targeting Africans, right? And even think about this. What do Africans look like? There are people lighter than me that are Africans. You don't see them targeting East Asian. It seems to be the Latin or South American, Central American groups that are being wrangled up for enforcement or for targeting. He has a point there. And people that are tripping about what ICE is doing, that's why I can rock with them on.
Authoritarian regimes begin by targeting people who are least able to defend themselves, but they do not stop there. Trump and his loyalists, they thrive on division because it allows them to take more power and exert even more control. And by the way, Trump, he's not opposed to lawlessness and violence as long as it serves him. What more evidence do we need than January 6th? Ask everyone.
Forgot he brought that up.
Take time, reflect on this perilous moment. A president who wants to be bound by no law or constitution, perpetuating a unified assault on American traditions. This is a president who in just over 140 days has fired government watchdogs that could hold him accountable for corruption and fraud. He's declared a war on culture, on history, on science, on knowledge itself. Databases, quite literally, are vanishing. He's delegitimizing news organizations, and he's assaulting the First Amendment. And the threat of defunding them, at threat, he's dictating what universities themselves can teach. He's targeting law firms and the judicial branch that are the foundations of an orderly and civil society. He's calling for a sitting governor to be arrested for no other reason than to, in his own words, for getting elected. And we all know this Saturday, he's ordering our American heroes, the United States military, and forcing them to put on a vulgar display to celebrate his birthday.
Now, that's the part. I know so many people are talking about that. That right there, hold on, because I have to bring something up. Give me a second. We're going to do this live. All right. So what he's talking about is this upcoming Saturday. It's the capstone of what's called the World Pride Celebration. All right. But hold on. No, not just that. My bad. That ain't what I'm trying to talk about. The military parade. That's what I'm trying to talk about. Oops. AI failed me on this one. So this is a magic that's going to be in downtown DC, and I wish I had the time just to drive down and see what it looks like. But they're supposed to be celebrating the Army's 250th birthday on June 14th, which also happens to fall on President Trump's 79th birthday. Early in May, he talked about how this parade and I'm just gonna try to do my best, Trump. So we're gonna have a great time. We're gonna have a great celebration. That's what he said. Then I'm gonna add, we're gonna do it bigly. It's gonna be big. It's gonna be huge. All right. So you're talking about, apparently there's supposed to be tanks, a lot of big army vehicles, helicopters flying, and I'm trying to imagine what it's going to look like. All right. And when President Trump got elected, he talked about draining the swamp and reining in federal spending, all this and that. And I'm like, but is this good use of federal spending? Sending all of these different vehicles and stuff that were loaded on to from tanks loaded on to trains from Austin, Texas, going into DC, howitzers expected to be traveling from Texas to DC, the Golden Knights jumping out and landing wherever they're planning on land at, fireworks, concert. The federal dollars are being spent on this. It's I don't know who was the first person or the first entity to say that this isn't anything but a disguise to have his ego stroked on his birthday, but he's trying to play it off as this is a military parade to show how strong our nation is. It's easy to see why people can oppose him on why he'll justify anything. He will find a reason to justify anything that he wants to do, and people are just going to say, "Yes, sir, President, sir." Nobody, or rarely will people challenge and say, "Hey, if you're talking about gutting our federal government, reducing spending in areas and things like that, should we be doing this? Right? Should we be doing this? This entity can't do this travel to ensure that this gets taken care of, but yeah, let's have a parade." I hope. And I wonder if anybody at any point is going to say happy birthday, or if his birthday is going to be brought up. I can give respect if at one point, no, like throughout the entire time, nothing gets talked about for his birthday. If he could get through the day and on any televised speech, not mention that it's his birthday once, I could respect the decision to have this done. But we'll see. Let's finish the video as it's almost done.
Just as other failed dictators have done in the past. Look, this isn't just about protests here in Los Angeles. When Donald Trump sought blanket authority to commandeer the National Guard, he made that order apply to every state in this nation. This is about all of us. This is about you. California may be first, but it clearly will not end here. Other states are next. Democracy is next. Democracy is under assault before our eyes. This moment we have feared has arrived. He's taking a wrecking ball to our founding fathers' historic project. 3 co-equal branches of independent government. There are no longer any checks and balances. Congress is nowhere to be found. Speaker Johnson has completely abdicated that responsibility. The rule of law has increasingly been given way to the rule of Don. The founding fathers, they didn't live and die to see this kind of moment. It's time for all of us to stand up. Justice Brandeis, he said it best. In a democracy, the most important office, with all due respect, Mr. President, is not the presidency, and it's certainly not governor. The most important office is office of citizen.
That's a very cool speech by Justice Brandeis. For those of y'all that don't know who that justice is, he was one of the earlier Supreme Court justices. I think one of the first ones. I'd have to go back and really take a look at that, because I've heard that quote before. Now, he was a justice in like the early 1900s. And you don't have to be a historical genius to know how our country was in the early 1900s. Okay? When the Supreme Court justice was talking about the people, I mean, let me challenge that a bit. What kind of people was he talking about? What was the power of the people also people that looked like me? Was the justice speaking about that and being inclusive of people that had my same skin tone? Knowing for what I know about that justice, I don't think that was the case. Because I did do a little bit of, I went through this thing where I was curious about like the law of the land and how our Supreme Court justices were appointed and how they grew up and how they interpret the law, right? And just because something is a law, is it right? Right? Slaves were legal at one point. Was it right? So, anyway, that's a very cool quote. The most powerful office is the office of the people. I like that quote. I just don't know if I would have quoted it.
At this moment, we all need to stand up and be held to account, a higher level of accountability. If you exercise your First Amendment rights, please, please do it peacefully. I know many of you are feeling deep anxiety, stress, and fear, but I want you to know that you are the antidote to that fear and that anxiety. What Donald Trump wants most is your fealty, your silence to be complicit in this moment. Do not give in to him.
Okay. I thought that was a really, really good video. I thought it was well done. His points that he gave, where he talked about you being the antidote, meaning the people, the points where he talked about doing things within the bounds of the law, the points where he talked about people that are found and proven to be breaking the law are going to be, prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. I thought that everything about that was good. His main point to me in that whole video was him basically saying what the president's doing is wrong and people should stand up. I don't know if people outside of California is going to feel that. Governor Newsom really divides people among whether they like him or they don't like him. Okay. I don't know much about him to give an opinion either way. If I saw this video and I knew nothing else about him, and you just asked me what are my thoughts on Governor Newsom based on this video and what I know about the laws and things like that, I would say, hey, that man has my support. I agree with him. I think he laid out a case that can say, hey, look, this is my state. I got this. If I need help, I know how to reach out to you. That's my take on it. Okay. So let's talk politics real quick. Okay. Actually, no, we just did that. Let's talk about the long-term implications of this. So let's zoom out, because this isn't about just Los Angeles. This is about what comes next. With this parade that's happening this weekend, you're talking about having a parade to celebrate the Army's 250th, time in service, when there's civil unrest that you also want to try to quell, during this time period, right? And I understand that there was a lot of planning that went into it, money that was already spent to make this whole parade thing happen this weekend. I get that, right? But can a president override a governor anytime that there's unrest? And if so, what stops future abuse by a president? Who at what point in the chain of command can go, we ain't going to do that. We're not doing that. That is not going to happen. Think about that. I'm curious what's going to come out of California filing a lawsuit. They're saying that Trump's use of the military violated both state rights and the Passe Comitatus Act. Say that 3 times real fast. I think that there's a bit of a tug of war going on in politics between it's not the individual. You really can't say it's the federal government either, because I don't believe that the big brother federal government is just out to just snatch people up and things like that. I think that if Our current president can challenge something. He will. I think that he will bump dangerously close up to the limits of what he can do. And there's not enough people that chooses to check him on it. I think that we're in a tug of war between civil liberties and control, and that's dangerous grounds. Okay? Think about what that could mean in the future. If something pops off in Texas, Chicago, Philly, wherever there's some type of unrest that pops up, is the federal government just going to outright jump in on it? Would this have happened in Texas? Right? Texas is a red state. I want to say Texas is a red state. Would the federal government, if this was happening in Texas, which probably Texas is one of those states that, hey, we support ICE popping up in places and just snatching people up. And that's why it's not of a big deal in Texas. I don't know. I'm just kind of speaking my mind out here. Maybe that's why we don't see these unrest in Texas. When's the last time that there was some type of unrest in Texas? Think about that too. You don't hear anything. Texas, Mississippi, Alabama, Iowa, Montana, Washington. The state of Washington always seems to have stuff pop off. California, it's more like Southern California, around the LA area. That's where things tend to pop off. But you don't see this stuff happening in some of these other states. Okay. I'd like to know what y'all think. If you have some time and you're catching this on the replay, speak your mind. I'm just a guy with a camera and a computer and a voice speaking my thoughts out. I don't have the answers. It's not my job to have the answers. What it is my job is to use my voice to speak up. That is my job, and that's your job. You have an obligation to use your voice and speak your mind. Again, I don't have the answers. The best that I can do is vote people in smarter than me that do have the answers, that are going to protect the liberties of the American people in the country that I live in. I've already raised my right hand and said that I would support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all threats, foreign and domestic. I've done that. I did it for 9 years in the United States Air Force. Bam. I've done that. Now I use my voice. Hopefully you guys can use yours too. Kathy said that there was a incident in Tulsa. My memory's drawing a blank. Let me look this up. When did Tulsa? Let's see. I know about what happened in 1921. Was there one recent though? Rodney King was 92 in Los Angeles. When was the last Tulsa incident? If you're talking about the Tulsa massacre in 1921, yeah, that was yeah, that one. Yeah, Black Wall Street. Let me see. Let me go to the Googles here. Let me see what were. Let me see. Look up a list of riots in the United States. Okay, yep. So that one was 1921. Yeah. What have there been any recent ones that have occurred? I was like, yeah, I know if you talked about Tulsa, that was 1921. There was the Zoot Suit riots in 1943, in which some white folks had attacked some Mexican Americans in Los Angeles over cultural tensions. I'm telling y'all, LA seems to get the business in when it comes to riots. Let's go into the civil rights era. You had Watts in 65, Detroit 67, Newark in 1967 as well. Chicago in 1968 in response to the assassination of Dr. Martin Luther King. The Stonewall riots I'm not familiar with in 1969, which were LGBTQ plus uprising in New York City that launched the modern gay rights movements. Stonewall riots in 69. And the Attica prison riots, that was 71. Inmates protested inhumane conditions resulted in a deadly raid. That one was tragic too. Let's see, when we get to more recent stuff in the late 20th century, had a the police acquittal in the death of Arthur McDuffie in 1980. That was before I was born, but I'm familiar with that one. Rodney King, as we talked about, was 92. 60 people got killed in that one. Cincinnati, 2001, triggered by the police shooting of Timothy Thomas, a black teenager. I'm not familiar with that one. You know, maybe I'm gonna do an episode of different riots in the U.S. Let's see, getting into the most recent ones, we have Oakland riots in 2009. Ferguson, I forgot Ferguson, the protests that had occurred in the police shooting of Michael Brown. That was 2014. Baltimore was 2015 with Freddie Gray. That was kind of close to home to me. I was only an hour west of that one. George Floyd in 2020 is considered the largest civil rights movement in U.S. history that had both peaceful and riots that occurred across all 50 states. I did not know that. I didn't know that that's considered the largest in U.S. history. George Floyd? George Floyd. I'm going to keep my mouth shut about George Floyd. I don't have nice things to say about George Floyd. The Capitol riot was January 6, 2021. We talked about that one. And then the LA riots that we're talking about now. Okay. Wow. The Capitol riots in January 6th of 2021, that did have National Guards that got activated and some things that had occurred as well. Kathy said that she was in Chicago in 1968 during the King riots. My mother wouldn't let us leave the house. You know, that had to be a time in history. Like, you lived it. I was just down in Tennessee and we went down to the place where MLK was assassinated at. And the history that was there was so much about that history, that event, and things surrounding it that I didn't know about. Because I'm just not a history guy. But me and my lady, we went to the location that he was killed and learned about everything that went down and what happened nationwide around that area too. And man, that was a time that I'm curious if I'm desensitized to some things, because what's happening in LA, anybody with a smartphone can turn it on and start recording. So we don't just get media and information from one source. We can get it from any source, right? People that have a drone are flying drones and capturing footage. We can get instant information just like that from our phone. Pull our phone out of our pocket and see what's going on. Instant notifications. I'm wondering if I'm desensitized to some of this stuff because I'm seeing it, right? There was a mass shooting that had occurred just yesterday or 2 days ago. Hardly anybody talked about it. There was a school shooting about 2 weeks ago. Hardly anybody talked about that. I think that your mom did the right thing trying to keep y'all safe as the riots were occurring in Chicago. in 1968, and that's history that you lived right in your backyard. Thank you for putting that into the comment section. That's my time. Am I going to be live next Wednesday? I am going to be live next Wednesday. For those of y'all that tuned in and checked out my live stream, thank you. We had several people commenting in there. Kathy Cree providing some historical context and things to the conversation as well. Thank you, Miss Kathy. To anybody else that's going to watch this, I appreciate you. This one went longer than I planned on going, but there were some things that I learned when I put this together. And I'm curious how things are going to go. I'm not going to be outside this weekend. My behind is going to be in my house chilling. Actually, I am going to be outside. I'm just not going to be nowhere near DC. I'm just not going to be anywhere near DC. I'm curious what foolishness is going to occur down in DC, if any. It's just you if you've lived on this earth long enough, you just know somebody's going to do something stupid. So I urge everybody that's going to be going out and going to DC to be careful. Be careful, check your six, be vigilant. That's all I'm saying. I'm not saying be paranoid, be vigilant. Y'all have a good weekend. Hit that like button if you haven't. Thanks for tuning in. I'm out. Peace.